not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Inauguration Day, Michael Patrick Shiels, radio stations across the state of Michigan. Tony Daunt on our AT&T line, the executive director of the Michigan Freedom Fund. He's in the news today, and we'll talk about why in just a moment. But first, your emotions on both sides of the coin as you watch what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Well, Inauguration Day, regardless of who the individual being sworn in is, what party they represent, their policies, it's one of those days that every American should be happy and proud to be an American, because it is, such a wonderful, beautiful tradition of this peaceful transfer of power. And despite, very feisty exchanges and sharp exchanges and, just a real valid difference of opinion between people, this is something where we can come together and say, the people have spoken, and this is who they've chosen. We wish them well. We pray for the nation and for them. And, hopefully Joe Biden today will say the right words that, help folks take him seriously, that he's going to work to heal some of the divides and, will not move forward with a lot of radical kind of changes that the progressive left wing of his party is so desperate to impose on people. I think we need some kind of, we need some boring normalcy these days.
Do you think that, and this calls for speculation, as they say in the courtroom, do you think that the president will leave a letter in the desk for Joe Biden after not inviting him to tea and not attending his inauguration, this tradition that started with George Herbert Walker Bush leaving that letter for Bill Clinton?
Unfortunately, I think given the performance of the last few weeks, I'd be shocked if he did, and perhaps if he does, I'm not sure what it says would be printable in most newspapers, but I guess we'll see what happens.
What do you think when you hear that Donald Trump is talking about starting a third party, the Patriot Party?
It really is unfortunate because despite his many shortcomings in terms of character and the way he conducts himself, a lot of the things that his administration was able to do are laudable, and we should have been focused on them and pointing them out and celebrating those policy accomplishments. Things like reshaping the court into a rule of law originalist court that's not going to be setting laws from the bench. Putting a voice to the millions of people who have been left behind over the last couple of decades by the policies coming out of Washington and many of our state governments. Those are real accomplishments. Those are things that, his political instincts were spot on highlighting those things and bringing them to the forefront. But because of his lack of discipline and lack of character in so many ways, that's all been overshadowed. And I think it just goes to show he's all about himself, not about the party, not about people that he purports to advocate for.
You've been very critical of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and I find it interesting that she selected you to now serve on the Michigan Board of State Canvassers, a 4-year term, from a field of 3 nominees provided by the Republican Party chair, Laura Cox. If she picked you, I'd like to know who the other 2 were.
Lots of jokes about what a wild time we live in, where Tony, you're the choice that the governor makes. But I know both Tori and Linda Lee, and I know they're wonderful women, and I think would have served admirably. And I appreciate Chairwoman Cox, putting my name forward, and Governor Whitmer for choosing me. I firmly believe in the principles and the policies of conservatism and the Republican Party, and I look forward to advocating for the party on this board. But it's also a position that requires fidelity to the rule of law, and that's something that I find should top all other considerations. what does the law say? Not what do we want the law to say, or what should the law say? What does the law say? And my actions should reflect that, and I look forward to upholding the law in this position.
We tend to talk insider here because a lot of our listeners are informed on what goes on at the Capitol and what goes on in state government and so forth. But give us a snap civics lesson, if you would, on what the Board of Canvassers is and what your role will be.
Well, it used to be a relatively obscure and anonymous board for the most part until this most recent election cycle. But it's charged with canvassing and certifying statewide elections, canvassing and certifying signatures for nominating petitions or initiatives that go before either the legislature or before the public for a vote, and a number of other issues. And it's made up of 4 individuals, 2 that were nominated by the Republican Party and 2 from the Democratic Party. And overall, it's many of the duties are ministerial, but there's a lot of things, a lot of important questions that we get to ask. And when there are differences of opinion, sometimes you'll see it deadlock and go to the courts, which helps kind of solve the issue and make sure that the people's voice is heard appropriately. And it's hoping that we can get back to some of that little less attention on it, because it's an important board. Transparency is obviously important. We always want the public aware of what we're doing, but I think some of the craziness of this election cycle really heightened the tensions around this board that aren't necessarily fitting for what it does.
You are satisfied with the validity of the Michigan result in the presidential election?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously disappointed in the outcome, but it was close, but it wasn't as close as it was 4 years ago. There are absolutely issues that we need to address related to our elections and how we conduct them. Just one small example, the fact that the Secretary of State mailed out 7.5 million unsolicited absentee ballot applications, and at least 500,000 of those went to people who have either moved or have died, or moved out of state. And that's the type of stuff that makes people wonder, well, what actually is going on with the administration of our elections? And maybe it wasn't nefarious intent, but it certainly makes people question what the intent was. And we need to make sure we clean those types of things up.
And you're also involved in 2 lawsuits against the Secretary of State. That is one of them addressed in that issue you just described?
Somewhat, yeah. One of them addresses the issue of clean voter rolls and making sure that they are clean, so that when we do, have elections, we can have faith in the fact that the people voting should be voting here in the state of Michigan.
Did you get a title now, a new title?
I believe I make everybody in my family and my friends, I can make them call me Your Honorable. But okay. I doubt that's going to be what they call me.
I'll do it. The Honorable Tony Daunt, Executive Director of the Michigan Freedom Fund, is now a member of the State Board of Canvassers. We're going to get a new title for Joe Biden today. It'll be President in Washington, D.C., and we'll have coverage of that tomorrow. The governor is there, too. More of that coming up, and what's next for Donald Trump? It's Michael Patrick.